Hello and welcome to Always Bored Never Boring. Today is a very exciting day. Why, I hear you ask? Well, it's either you or the little voices in my head, so we will say it's you. Once again, a good friend of the channel, Kent Caliber, has hooked me up with the wonderful people at Avalon Hill to ensure I received a review copy of the latest expansion for HeroQuest, Against the Ogre Horde. And this is an expansion that is really exciting for so many reasons. It is a revised and updated edition of an original classic expansion that was previously only available in Europe. It includes a hero that was previously exclusive to the Hasbro Pulse HasLab crowdfunding campaign. It includes brand new monsters, plus brand new variants of monsters we already know and hate, and it includes a brand new head-to-head skirmish mode. All that crammed into a box with a recommended retail price of £40.99 or $44.99. With that much going on, this expansion is too big for just one video, so I've decided to break things up into more manageable pieces. In today's video, I'm going to run through all the components and the rules associated with them, and give my overall first impressions. There will then be 3 more videos, covering the new druid hero, the new arena combat mode, and a spoiler-heavy deep dive into the 10-part quest for Zargon's Eyes only. Hopefully, we're going to have a lot of fun. So let's start at the very beginning. It's a very good place to start. Against the Ogre Horde isn't a completely new expansion like Rise of the Dreadmoon. Neither is it a faithful remake of an old expansion like Frozen Horror. It is probably what Hollywood would call a reimagining. Against the Ogre Horde was originally an expansion from 1990 that was exclusive to Europe, never receiving an American release. Because Avalon Hill's new edition of HeroQuest uses the American rule set, which is significantly different to the European rule set, I assumed a simple copy and paste reprint with updated components wasn't possible. However, what we have ended up with is an expansion that adheres as closely as possible to the original and is surprisingly faithful, while still adding lots of new content. Against the Ogre Horde is a large expansion and comes in a box the same size as the Frozen Horror, Mage of the Mirror and Rise of the Dreadmoon. That means you are absolutely spoiled with new content, most notably with brand new enemies, all with unique sculpts. The original Ogre Horde expansion included 7 new enemy miniatures, really lovely ones that almost make the obscene asking prices on eBay worthwhile. There were 4 Ogre Warriors, 1 Ogre Champion, 1 Ogre Chieftain and 1 Ogre Lord, all designed to fit on a single space on the board. For the new edition, we get a whopping 18 new miniatures. That's 7 enemy types, 10 unique sculpts, including 3 oversized enemies. First, there are the variants of classic enemies from the HeroQuest core set. There are 3 new skeleton archers, all in the same pose, and this miniature is pretty neat. There's a decent amount of detail, nothing too fussy, and while the detail isn't really crisp, especially on the skull, there is enough to work with. Some washes and dry brushing and that's going to look just fine. One quick note on these, mine were wedged in the plastic insert pretty firmly, and being very thin they are prone to being damaged with excessive force. I pushed them out of the insert from behind to make sure they were unharmed, and that's probably good practice in all cases. Of course, our monsters come with reference cards. Here is the skeleton archers. They have exactly the same stats as a regular skeleton, but they can attack at range. If they target an adjacent hero, then they only roll 1 dice to attack instead of 2. I like his little hat in the picture, but I do wonder why he doesn't have the chainmail cowl like on the miniature. Next up we have goblin archers, although they don't have bows at all. There are 4 in total. 2 of them have bombs and look like they are females. These are fun. Again, the detailing is just a little soft, but I think they look great. I do like the look of the goblins in the new edition of HeroQuest. They have that Gremlins vibe to them. The other 2 goblins have boomerangs and appear to be males. This is another fun idea, but there is something just a little off about them. Not sure if it's the head being a little bit too big, or the ears being too long and curved so they look more like horns, but it just doesn't sit quite right with me. It's not a bad miniature, but I like it the least of all the miniatures in this set. Unfortunately, the awesome idea of bombs and boomerangs doesn't translate into awesome new rules. Regardless of their weapons, these goblins don't do anything particularly special. They have exactly the same stats as a regular goblin, but they gain a standard ranged attack, and only roll 1 dice against adjacent targets. That is a little disappointing. It would have been fun to see goblins throwing bombs with area of effect attacks or boomerangs that attack twice, once on the way out and once again when returning to the goblin. Still, it's nice to have miniatures to reflect goblins with ranged attacks, so I can't be too upset. Then we have 4 new orc archers, 2 each of 2 different sculpts. First up, the chunky boys. These miniatures look pretty awesome from the front. They have sturdy poses and decent detailing on the armour. However, they have been cast as a single piece, something that appears Avalon Hill tried to do whenever possible to reduce production costs. Single piece casts are naturally flatter with less dynamic range of motion and can also have increased undercutting issues. For example, if we look at the quiver on the orc's back, and I'm calling it a quiver but it might well be a sword sheath as the massive arrows he is firing would never fit in a quiver this size, we can see that the side section has been hyperextended to prevent the need for an undercut. This is not the most egregious thing in the world, but it is probably a nit worth picking, especially for the painters and miniatures collectors out there. The other 2 orcs are female variants, similar posing and armour but slightly more slender and with flowing hair cascading down their backs. Again, we have what I think is supposed to be a quiver on the back, which is way too small for the arrows she is firing, and again, as this is a single piece cast, we get another example of an undercut fill. It's a bit less obvious though. In terms of the stats, I'm sure you can guess they are exactly the same as a regular orc, but they gain a ranged attack, and if they attack an adjacent target they roll just 1 dice instead of 3. In total, that's 4 orc archers, 4 goblin archers and 3 undead archers. And the really cool thing here is that while some of the Ogre Horde quest maps do specifically request for the placement of a ranged enemy, there are also additional rules that state whenever Zargon is placing a monster on the board, they can choose to place a ranged version of that monster. Awesome for 2 reasons. Firstly, it gives Zargon an additional decision point. Is it better to place the melee focused fighters or to place ranged units? Secondly, you can port this rule into any other quest. It's a really simple twist in the rules, but it has the potential to completely change a particular adventure and how heroes have to deal with it. All good stuff, but it gets better. We next have 4 ogre warriors, 2 each of 2 different designs, male and female. And these ogres have different sculpts and different stats compared to the ogres from Major the Mirror, which I really didn't expect. Avalon Hill didn't need to do that. They could have easily recycled the sculpts they already had, but they went the extra mile, and it's really cool to get completely new variants of existing enemy types. The Ogre Warriors still only fill 1 space on the board, but they are really chunky, and I love the detail and posing. Their grumpy faces are really good, and with their hulking size and primitive weapons, they look suitably intimidating. If the heroes bump into a couple of these, they know they are going to be in for a tough fight. These are some of my favourite sculpts in the box. Looking at the stats, we have Move 6, Attack 5, Defend 4, Body 5 and Mind Points 1. Overall, that's a little weaker but also a little faster than the Major the Mirror Ogres, who were Move 4, Attack 6, Defend 4, Body 5 and Mind Points 2. On the subject of ogre stats, I suppose I should point out that in the original Ogre Horde expansion there was a very odd variable hit point system in place for the ogres. It was a sort of shared hit point tracker that all the ogres used, with spaces along the way that indicated when an ogre would die. This system has, rather unsurprisingly, not been carried over to the new edition. However, on your adventures you may occasionally bump into a multi-phase enemy. These are boss level monsters that don't die when they reach 0 body points, instead taking on a new phase that grants them more body points and a modified set of statistics. We will look at that mechanism in more detail when I do my deep dive into the campaign. Additionally, the Ogre Horde quest now gives the heroes the chance to hire an ogre mercenary. They can only ever have 1 such mercenary at a time, and they use 1 of the enemy ogre miniatures to represent their new ally. Ogre mercenaries cost 150 gold up front, and then an additional 75 gold to retain their services between each quest. If one should die, or you don't pay the retainer, then you have to hire a new one at 150 gold coins again. They are a worthy addition to the party as they are movement 8, attack 4, defend 4, body points 4 and mind points 1. And with that we have covered all of the little enemies, but this box also boasts 3 huge enemies, each of which covers 2 spaces on the board and can attack any of the 10 spaces adjacent to them. First is the Ogre Champion, and this is a rather lovely lump of plastic. It feels very solid and weighty, and it has a charming chunkiness to the design. Details are big and bold, and I can see people having a lot of fun painting this. The one thing I'm not keen on is the shield on the left arm is set too close to the arm. It looks like it's actually embedded in the ogre's body. Not a major issue though. The stats are, I would say, a little weak, or at least they feel that way to me. They are almost identical to the regular ogre warriors at move 6, attack 5, defend 4, body 6 and mind 1. That means despite being so much bigger, the ogre champion only benefits from a single extra hit point and the ability to attack diagonally. Next is the Ogre Commander, and this is another really impressive miniature. It's a similar sort of size and has the same chunkiness and solid posing. I like all the details, the bones and the demonic helmet. This really does look like something that could challenge the heroes and make for an impressive end of level boss. Stats are a significant improvement over the champion. It's move 4, attack 6, defend 5, body 6, mind 2. Those are far from insurmountable numbers, but it should take the heroes a concerted effort and maybe a few potions of strength to wear him down. The final enemy is the big bad, the head honcho, the Ogre Lord. What a truly intimidating figure. I love all the character put into this miniature. The big regal scepter, the crown, the treasures and trinkets hanging off his belt, and the large animal pelt thrown over his shoulder. The pointing posture and sneering grimace is a nice touch, as it looks like he's calling out the most powerful hero for a duel. And also, he has little bumps all over his chest and arms, like the scars that some African tribes apply in scarification rituals. I'm not going to claim I know much about that, but this could be seen as a symbol of the Lord's power and status. Naturally, he has the beefiest stats of all, with move 4, attack 6, defend 6, 10 body points and 5 mind points. That's not too bad at all. While that is all of the enemies in this box, it's certainly not all the miniatures. You also get this good little boy, a wolf. He's significantly smaller than the giant wolves we got in Major the Mirror, but no less aggressive. You will note he is in a hero red, and that's because this miniature can be used in 2 different ways. First, you can use the wolf as an animal ally. Animal allies were first seen in the free online quest Into the Northlands, which serves as a prequel to the Frozen Horror. Avalon Hill included some playtest rules there that would allow the barbarian to take a friendly wolf into the dungeon with her. Those playtest rules have now been canonised and made official here. Animal allies can be recruited at no cost, but only if the party contains less than 4 heroes. The ally is controlled by one of the heroes and takes a turn immediately after that hero. It can move, attack and defend, but cannot open doors, search or use any items, although an adjacent hero can use a potion on an animal ally when there are no monsters adjacent. Incidentally, the animal allies are not the only playtest rules from Into the Northlands that are made official here. Against the Ogre Horde is also the first expansion to include the unthreatened movement rules, which I've been using for a long time. Simply put, if there are no monsters around, you get a fixed movement of 4 for each d6 you would normally roll to move. That means for most heroes, they get a fixed movement of 8. But back to our wolf. When used as an ally, the wolf has movement 10, attack 3, defend 2, 5 body points and 1 mind point. They have the ability to attack diagonally. If you have a full complement of 4 heroes in your party, fear not, you may still get to use the wolf. Only not as an ally, because Against the Ogre Horde also includes a brand new but not really brand new hero, the druid, and you can use the wolf when the druid casts their shapeshifting spell. Now, the druid is not technically a new hero class. It was first introduced during the Hasbro Pulse HasLab crowdfunding campaign as a backer incentive, but at that time it was represented by a single miniature which was, well, it was bloody ghastly. I strongly disliked that miniature, so I was absolutely delighted to discover we would be getting 2 brand new sculpts, one male, one female, in Ogre Horde to represent the druid, who is now a halfling. This is the male variant, and it's not too bad at all. Detailing is a little soft in places, but you have to appreciate the big old moustache. an all-round improvement over the original for me. And this is the female version, which I think is even better. I really like the strong stance here, the staff is really great, and I like the braided hair. It's a nice looking hero, and obviously you get cards as well, male and female versions of the character card, plus the 3 druid spell cards. But we will talk about all of that in more detail in another video when I do my druid showcase. Moving on, we still aren't done with the new plastic. We get one new piece of furniture. Yes, only one, but it is a good one. A new throne scaled up for an ogre's backside. In the original Ogre Horde expansion, there was a little piece of card that you were supposed to use in conjunction with the plastic side pieces from the throne in the core game, so you could never use both thrones in the same quest. Now our Ogre Lord finally has a seat worthy of his seat. We get 2 new double doors as well. These are used as the entrances to the arena for the new skirmish mode, and I love them. They are really solid, and they do this. That is the kind of pointless but awesome details I love in a game. Finally, there are 4 stone doors, similarly sturdy and with the purposefully crude carving that is going to give your ogre's lair a bit of personality. These stone doors are a feature from the original version of the expansion. They served as barriers that the heroes had to open with brute strength. The barbarian could roll 3 dice, while the dwarf or elf could roll 2, and if they rolled double skulls, the door would open. The wizard was too weedy to even try. For the new edition, Avalon Hill have altered the rules slightly to allow for the fact that you might be playing with other heroes. Now, to force a stone door, you have to roll dice equal to what the rules call your hero's base attack dice. The rule is clear enough, you will roll the dice specified on your character card, but it bugs me, probably more than it really should, because it's almost like the designers forgot how their own game works. In the original European rules, heroes didn't start with weapons. The attack dice stat on their character cards was their base attack dice, the number of dice they rolled until they acquired some weapons and started using those instead. So those values could be seen as their physical strength attributes. In the North American rules, heroes start with weapons, and the value of those weapons is incorporated into their starting attack dice value specified on their character cards. The barbarian rolls 3 dice because he starts the game equipped with a broadsword, which allows him to roll 3 dice. On that understanding, it seems weird to use the starting attack values for determining if a character is strong enough to open a door. Not only is it thematically weird, it also leads to anomalies, like the rogue heir who starts with a dagger and the wandering monk who starts unarmed, only rolling 1 dice to try to open a door, while the tiny warlock who starts with a wand rolls 2. It also doesn't take into account a hero's ability to get stronger through means other than equipping weapons. I think drinking a potion of strength or transforming into a bear or a demon should improve your chances of opening a stone door. Otherwise you risk having long stretches of the game where players are hampered simply by their inability to roll 2 skulls, which isn't going to be a lot of fun. And worst of all, it doesn't account for the fact it's very possible for a party to have no heroes that are strong enough. Go into the dungeon with the monk, the rogue heir, the wizard and the druid, and you've already lost before you set foot across the threshold. I can't say I'm entirely sure what a good alternative would be, and I'm really not sure it's a hill worth dying on, but I'm definitely making sure I have an ogre mercenary in every party to open all my doors for me. That is finally it as far as the plastic components, and we have already seen most of the cards at this point, as this expansion does not include any new treasure cards or equipment cards. You just get the character cards and spell cards for the druid, the cards for the ogre and wolf allies, the new enemy stat cards, and then these. And this is just a really weird choice from the designers. You get 15 dread spell cards, 3 different spells, 5 of each, that are in a completely different format to the dread spell cards from every other expansion. This probably requires a bit of explanation. In the European edition of HeroQuest, there were no chaos spells in the core game. Morcar occasionally had access to the elemental spells that the heroes normally used, but it wasn't until Against the Ogre Horde and Wizards of Morcar that the forces of chaos really got to flex their magical might. In Wizards of Morcar, of course, Morcar employed some evil wizards. each with their own magic decks: a High Mage, an Orc Shaman, a Storm Mage and a Necromancer. But in Against the Ogre Horde, Morcar got Dread Spell tokens. Oval card tokens that were used to track the spells that certain bosses could use: Mind Lock, Mind Blast and Dominate. This was a brand new magic system introduced for the expansion, and honestly, I thought Avalon Hill would ditch it in favour of simply creating some new dread spells in the same format as spells from every other expansion. But no, they have quite faithfully retained the original magic system, simply changing the tokens into cards. And this is just a bit weird and silly, I think. There was no need to create new spells in a new format, because it's another deck of cards to organise and store, and another deck of cards that isn't compatible with what we already have. That's just going to make it more difficult to make your own homebrew content. If you standardise cards, you can be more creative and flexible in how you use them, doing card drafts or random pulls to determine the result of special magical traps, or even just having secret information like a hand of spell cards that you can surprise the heroes with. Designing new cards is, for me, a poor choice, an adherence to the original form of the expansion that was unnecessary, because the new edition of HeroQuest already has a magic system and it works just fine. Now, I do understand that having multiple copies of these spell cards has a functional purpose. They allow tracking of the number of times a spell is used or the duration for which a spell is in effect. But I think most players could have easily tracked that with hit point tokens on the cards, or a scrap of paper, or even a separate set of small tokens printed on one of the punch boards. Oh, look, the expansion includes a whole sheet of hourglass tokens. Those look useful for tracking things like the passage of time. I mean, sometimes you just don't need to bloat a product beyond what it already is. And to be honest, I think the multiple cards add unnecessary confusion in some instances, especially with the sloppy way some of the spells are worded. For example, the spell Mind Lock says that the attacker and defender roll combat dice equal to their mind points. For each hit the attacker lands, the defender is frozen for 1 turn and takes a Mind Lock card from the attacker. They cannot move or attack and defend with only 1 dice. At the end of each of their turns, a frozen hero returns a Mind Lock card to the attacker and can also roll combat dice equal to their mind value. If they score 3 skulls, they break the spell and can move freely from next turn, returning all of the Mind Lock cards to the attacker. The implication here is that if a quest says a sorcerer gets 3 Mind Lock cards, that doesn't mean they can cast it just 3 times. It means they can only freeze a hero for a maximum of 3 turns at a time. That is just a bit messy, and it becomes more messy when you consider the other 2 spells don't work that way. For the Dominate spell, the attacker and defender roll combat dice equal to their mind values. If the attacker scores at least 2 hits, the spell succeeds and they take control of the defender, moving them and taking an action. The rule states that the dominated hero is handed a Dominate spell card, and at the end of the attacker's turn, the spell ends. No mention of returning the spell card to the attacker, or even discarding it. Finally, there is the Mind Burst spell, which was Mind Blast in the original Ogre Horde. And here, the Mind Burst spell cards are used to track how many times the sorcerer can cast the spell, as 1 is discarded each time. The attacker and defender roll combat dice equal to their mind value, and whoever rolls the most skulls wins. The loser takes mind point damage equal to the difference between the skulls they rolled and their opponent rolled. And it should probably be noted that in the original version, if a hero ran out of mind points, they were knocked unconscious for the rest of the mission. In the new version, we have the shock rules that were first seen in the Frozen Horror expansion. All told, we have 3 different spells that all seem to use the associated spell cards in slightly different ways. That kind of inconsistency isn't necessary, and I would have really liked to see the designers take this opportunity to clean it up. Anyway, it's taken a long time, but we have nearly got through everything in this box. We have just the punch boards left. There are 3 in total with lots of good stuff on them. We get 5 double-sided room tiles, 4 of which will be familiar to anyone who played the original Ogre Horde. There is the Pit of Chaos, Dread, Pit of Dread, and on the reverse of that we have the outside location that marks the way in or out of the ogre's lair. The outside tile doesn't have spaces on it, neither did the original, and I do wish it did, just because it would make the tile more useful for homebrew games. HeroQuest needs more outside locations. We then have 3 other smaller overlays that are mainly for aesthetic purposes on one side, with some very fancy rugs on 2 of them. On the reverse of these, you have the 2 antechambers where heroes and monsters gather before entering the arena, and then a bridge spanning a bottomless abyss. Very scary. Then we have the large arena tile, which is only used for the new skirmish gameplay. It's double-sided, but both sides are functionally identical. This is our largest room tile to date across all the expansions, and it isn't designed to sit on the HeroQuest board at all. In conjunction with the 2 arena antechambers, it forms its own mini-board. That is a big departure for HeroQuest. It's the first time we have ventured beyond the confines of the classic board layout. It's also a departure from the original expansion, which didn't have any skirmishing or arena-based gameplay at all. Finally, we have a bunch of tokens. A few of these are for marking the new Pits of Darkness, but most of them are for use with the arena mode, and because that new mode adds quite a lot of rules, we will be talking about it in more detail in a separate video. However, I did just want to mention that these tokens are double-sided, and this bothers me. I am fine with double-sided tokens. It makes sense if you have something like a question mark on one side and a power up on the reverse. There is function to that, it serves a purpose. But when we have tokens where each side serves a completely different purpose, that's where I draw the line. For the sake of a few extra 1-inch squares of card, you are making it more difficult to organise and store the game, and more difficult to find exactly what you need during gameplay. The very last thing we get in the box is our new quest book. The original Ogre Horde expansion had 7 missions, and all 7 of those missions are present and correct in the new edition, almost exactly as they were originally presented. The map layouts, the monsters, and even the position of the traps is almost identical in all cases, and that does concern me slightly. The original expansion was designed for the European rule set, where most monsters had a single body point. Few things die that easily in the American version of the game, so doing a direct port may not have been the best course of action. Some battles may simply be too tough, or too much of a slog to get through, and I really hope the designers have done sufficient playtesting to ensure that the gameplay is balanced and fun. Otherwise, Zargon players may have to do a lot of tweaks behind the scenes to keep the campaign rolling. The fun thing about the new edition is, while it recreates the original 7-part campaign in whole, Avalon Hill also added 3 new missions to make it a more substantial 10-part quest. The 3 new missions act as a sort of prequel to the main quest line and make use of the new arena combat rules. Players can either play through all 10 parts or simply jump immediately to quest 4 if they aren't interested in the arena combat and want to play through something that is similar to the original Ogre Horde experience. And I love that. That is a great choice. The idea is pretty fun too. Zargon has manipulated a reclusive Ogre Horde in the hopes of recruiting them to his army. The heroes need to put a stop to this, but they have no idea where the ogre's lair is. Mentor explains that the current master of battle at the World's End tournament, an ogre called Gruzbella, may know the location of the lair, but she isn't going to volunteer that information to just anybody. The heroes will need to win her respect by battling through the ranks of the tournament, besting the current champions, and perhaps even facing Gruzbella herself. That's really all I can say about the quest for now, without risking spoilers. But as always, I will be taking a deep dive into the campaign in a separate video and sharing my thoughts on each and every adventure. For now, I think I better start wrapping things up. No offense to the mummies shambling around the dungeon. This expansion is, well, it's just packed. I don't think it can be stressed enough. These big box HeroQuest expansions are such good value, and this could be the best value of any so far. A new 10-part quest already offers so much additional gameplay, but to also get 7 new monster types is huge, especially when 3 of them can be easily ported into any other quest line to vary up the gameplay without having to add in any homebrew rules at all. On top of that, you are getting a brand new gameplay mode, which not only serves as the first 3 missions in the quest, but which is also a functioning standalone skirmish game that you can roll out if you really don't have time to play a full adventure. Then you are getting the animal ally rules with a wolf ally, new ogre mercenary rules, and a new, sort of new, hero class with male and female variant sculpts. It's a lot. Not everything is perfect, of course. I'm not too happy with the way the new dread spells were incorporated. The rules for stone doors could probably have used some work. the double-sided tokens is an ongoing beef I have with all HeroQuest products, and I do have concerns that the straight ports of the original adventures may not flow quite so well under the American rule set. Also, there are a few extra things I think could have been included. Some new treasure, equipment or artifacts would have been nice, and there is at least one notable enemy type in the quest that I would have liked to have seen some miniatures for. But, on the whole, there is much more to be positive about than negative here, and while I haven't played the campaign yet, at first blush, this seems like a really solid addition to the product line. All that's left to do is to thank Kent and Avalon Hill for sending me this review copy of the expansion, and to thank you for watching. If you like what you see here, check your local stockist to see if and when they have copies for sale, or you can go to the Hasbro website to order direct using the link in the video description below. Remember, there are more videos to come covering specific elements of this expansion in more detail, and as always, if you like the video, please consider pressing the like button. If you really like the video, please consider subscribing if you don't already do so, and hopefully, I will see you all again very soon. Bye bye everyone, bye bye.